Bringing you the top stories from Bonners Ferry to St. Mary's and everywhere in between, this is the North Idaho Prepcast with Ryan Scaggs.
That's right. It is another edition of the North Idaho Prepcast here on IdahoSports.com, brought to you by the Idaho Division of Public Health. I am Brandon Bainey, and joining us for the first time in a long time, I'm very happy to bring in Ryan Scaggs. Ryan, good to see you. What's going on?
Not much. I'm back with a living. So yeah, it's been a few weeks, so I'm glad to be back.
Yes, absolutely. Now, if you are watching the video of this on IdahoSports.com, you can see Ryan, but it's going to be kind of lagging a little bit. His internet is not feeling well today, so it'll be all right. The audio sounds good. So if you have the audio of this at IdahoSports.com or wherever you download your podcasts, you're not going to notice anything. But if you're watching the video on the IdahoSports.com YouTube channel or Facebook page, you'll see Ryan kind of lagging and moving in slow motion, which I guess is probably, we talked about this before we hopped on. I didn't know how much you wanted to talk about it, but you've been gone for a couple of weeks. If you want to tell people where you've been and what's been going on.
Yeah, I had COVID. And it sucked. So, I'm slowly getting back to it. You could say to an extent that I've got some lengthy symptoms of it, but or I guess side effects that have still been hitting me a little bit. So it's made doing play-by-play obviously very difficult, because not having lung capacity is something that's been something I'm working through, which is good. I'm still on some medications and stuff that's helping with that, but I'll take what I can get and be back on the podcast for sure, and hopefully get back in the driver's seat on Friday nights doing football. We'll see if we can do it this Friday. If we can, that'd be awesome, but I can't make any promises to anybody yet, because I don't know how I'm feeling and if I'm going to have a coughing attack or whatever. So it's been a long process and it's stunk, but I'm open about what I'd had, and I'm not going to tell anybody what to do or what not to do. So that's entirely up to them, but yeah, I had to take some time off because I was not feeling the greatest. So I'm slowly coming back and getting back, and so it's good to kind of have this sports stuff come back into the forefront, and it's good because it gives me some normalcy.
Yes, for sure.
But Craig did an awesome job filling in too, and the coach at Mullen. So I want to give them props for jumping in on short notice and helping out too. So.
Yeah, and Craig is a busy guy. He's got a little one that he's looking after all day, and so it was nice for Craig to be able to fit us into his schedule for sure. So I'm just glad that you're doing better and you're doing okay. And this will be a good test run to see how you hold up for this, and then like you said, maybe eventually transition back to a 2-hour game, right?
Yeah, exactly. So I still get the random, if I get a cough or two, you'll hear it obviously, but that's why. So yeah, I was out with that, but it's been affecting a lot of people. And so, it's just kind of one of those things that we have to deal with now. And so I have to take care of me first. And as bad as I've wanted to do some of these games, it's just been not possible. So,
yeah.
But yeah, no, I'm back today and we get to talk sports. So I'm happy to do that. Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, yeah, we're feeling the effects of COVID around the state, especially up north. Again, this is the North Idaho Prepcast, where we're talking about District 1 athletics. St. Mary's has been shut down for some time, Ryan, and they are continuing to be shut down until October 11th, which has really thrown the schedule into chaos a little bit with what's going on at St. Mary's, particularly in football and soccer, where there are not as many dates to work around. So,
yeah. You start getting later in the year and it's harder to reschedule things and move stuff around. And, I think we saw it a little bit last week too, between Mullen and St. Regis was supposed to play Kootenai. There was some injuries too, but there was some illness going around as well in that game. And I believe that's why it was forfeited. And then also I think Priest River ran into that with Orfino on Friday as well. And so, Priest River picks up their first win, and it's probably not the way that they want to do it, because you actually want to legitimately play the game that you've been practicing to do. But to get their first win in 3 years by winning over the forfeit over Orfino. So it's affecting a lot of teams around here in a lot of schools.
No doubt. Well, let's start the conversation with the 1A football since you kind of led into it. Mullen St. Regis beats Kootenai 2-0 in the forfeit, of course. The big matchup 2 weeks ago, Ryan, was Wallace finally playing Lakeside for the first time this year. It was a big, crazy shootout. Lakeside won it late. And the news that came out last week is that next year, for football only, Wallace and Lakeside will actually be competing at the 1A D2 level. So now you've got kind of this 5-team conference with Mullen, Clark Fork, and Kootenai, along with Wallace and Lakeside. I think that's going to be a really fun conference.
That'll be super competitive for sure. I mean, what we've seen Clark Fork do this year, I think, is surprising a lot of people. And they've been super competitive. I mean, they beat Wallace this last week, but playing Mullen St. Regis is tough. And so yeah, for a 5-team conference to be formed in North Idaho, yeah, heck yeah, let's see that happen and they let the cream rise to the top. I think it's going to help one for the playoff picture, obviously, but any more competition thrown into that conference, I think will help all teams. So especially with what you talked about with the Mullen St. Regis coach about they've got a couple classes left where they're going to still have some kids in the school, so there's going to be that competition level will still be there. I'd love to see that moving forward. I mean, the reclassification thing, I know, threw a wrench in a lot of things down south. It didn't really affect up north too much. But other than this league forming, I think is going to be pretty awesome. That'd be great for all teams.
Yeah, so you mentioned it. Clark Fork beat Wallace last week, 48-32. The Wampus Cats are 4-1. Their only loss is to Mullen St. Regis, and that might be the only blemish on their resume the entire way through. And yet, a lot of times up north in District 1, it's a one-bid league, right? Only because there's such a small number of teams. So I'm hoping that maybe with this 5-team conference forming, you might get that second team from District 1 into the playoffs, a chance for a second team to go in and really show what they can do.
I'm still not ruling out Clark Fork if they can run the table, getting a high enough rating to get a bid, get an at-large. And maybe great to see if that happens. I don't know necessarily on the 1A D2 level how many at-larges are available for the playoff picture, but if they can get in, it would be awesome. But yeah, I mean, like you said, I think if you get a 5-team conference, they're going to get 2 bids. And that definitely helps the playoff picture for the teams up north because, I mean, how it would be so disappointing if you have a Clark Fork team with 1 loss and say Mullen St. Regis runs the table too. And they have their 1 loss, obviously, being out of state. Both teams are more than deserving, I think, to get a shot in the playoffs. But yeah, moving forward, it's, next year, if that happens and that's the case, and you get like the Lakesides thrown into the mix too, that's going to, 1, help scheduling, but 2, it's going to help that playoff picture kind of clear up and get the second bid.
Yeah, so when you look at the 1A D2 bracket, that is the only bracket that is predetermined, and they say we're taking this amount from this league and this amount from this league, and there's no at-larges. So and District 1 only gets the one team, which is just unfortunate, I think, because I do think Clark Fork probably could stack up to some of these 3rd, 4th place teams from other leagues, but
oh, absolutely. They've had an awesome season, so they can't knock anything because they're doing everything they're asked to do. I mean, Mullen St. Regis is a great ball club that plays solid 8-man football. So, you don't want to fault the Wampus Cats for doing anything wrong this year, but I mean, gosh, you'd love to see them get a look if they're going to go, say 7-1. Like, you want to see them get the chance to maybe make some noise against a 3rd place team from another conference. For sure.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. So let's talk about the 3A Intermountain League now, Ryan. When it comes to the playoffs this year, they get 2 teams in, which means there's going to be a really good team left at home because between Bonners Ferry and Kellogg and Timberlake, I mean, we're finally going to get into conference play, and it's going to be really fun to watch these teams duke it out. Now, if you look at just the results from last week, it's not going to look super impressive, right? Timberlake lost to Lakeland 50-0, and Kellogg played out of state, played Frenchtown High School from Montana and lost 38-23. But
Frenchtown's a solid team, and they've always been solid.
Yep, they're a really good program, and so I still don't know how this race is going to shake out in the Intermountain League, but we're finally going to find out this week as the big game is Kellogg at Bonners Ferry.
Yeah, and I think that this thing shakes out. We'll really see this test. What is Kellogg? I think is where we'll kind of see it a little bit. I think we'll find out more about Kellogg than we do about Bonners, just because Kellogg's schedule, not necessarily, I mean, other than the Frenchtown game that we saw last week, not really having that one marquee test. And I mean, St. Mary's, as we've seen, is down this year. Orfino, we're finding out, is down too. There's been some injuries on both teams as well, so I know that there's been COVID issues. So they've been without some of their better players. But this will be a good test. I think, like we've talked about, and I know Craig talked about Kellogg. They've got a couple of the better players in the area. I don't care what classification you're talking about. Their quarterback, is a stud. So it'll be a test for Bonners Ferry on defense for sure, just to see what they're able to accomplish on that defensive side of the ball, and actually see what they can do on offense. I think, we haven't seen a high scoring output from Bonners Ferry, so it'll be interesting to see what they're able to put together. But Kellogg on offense, we know what they can do. But this thing, I think, in the IML, it's going to shake out like a bar brawl. Like, let's be honest. And then, we're looking at next week. Where we're gonna have Timberlake and Kellogg next week. So, you get like 3 weeks of solid football, and then Timberlake and Bonners Ferry at the end of the year. You don't know how that one's gonna shake up either. So, it's gonna be an interesting one. And I think, with 2 bids coming from that conference, there's a couple teams that can make some noise for sure.
Yeah, it's almost like this Kellogg Bonners game is an elimination game, if you think about it that way.
Absolutely.
It's going to be fun to watch. Bonners Ferry might be a little more battle tested. You mentioned Kellogg's strength of schedule. They've played some 2A teams. They played Corvallis High School from Montana, which, dude, is a Montana guy. They're bad. They're bad. My alma mater, Stevensville High School, is one of the worst teams in the state, and they beat Corvallis. That gives you an idea of how bad they are. So
yeah. No, yeah. It's that 3A one, and I wouldn't be surprised if everybody goes 1-1. Like, that's one thing too that you look at, and it's like, you think about it, it's like, man, we could end up in a tiebreak. Like, we really legitimately could end up in a tiebreak, and which would throw a whole other monkey into the mix. But yeah.
Do you know, and I don't know this off the top of my head, and maybe you don't either, because each conference kind of leaves tiebreakers up to their own devices. But if that happened, if there was a 3-way tie and every team had beaten each other and they all beat Priest River, let's assume, and there's no other common opponents, what do we do? Is it the Kansas City playoff where they all meet up on a Monday?
I know that in the IEL, when I was at Lakeland, we almost ended up in the same situation, and luckily, I think it was Sandpoint pulled a rabbit out of their hat and beat Moscow that one year, and it got rid of the Kansas City tiebreak. But yeah, I mean, I'm not sure up here. I'll have to ask, because that raises a great question. I might reach out to Coach Albie and see if he can answer that question for me if it ends up in that situation, because it would be pretty cool to see a Kansas City tiebreak. I mean, I haven't seen one in a long time, but it's a definite possibility if they all go 1-1. I don't know what the tiebreak, if they go based off of the max preps rating or what they use, but if that's the case, then it's kind of settled. I think it would be Timberlake and Kellogg, but I don't know. Like, I mean, yeah, you start running into some weird scenarios when you start getting later in the year.
Yeah, and for those that aren't familiar, the Kansas City playoff or Kansas City tiebreaker is basically, it's kind of like a jamboree, right? All 3 teams get together. One team starts at the 25 or whatever.
Essentially, it's overtime. Yeah, you play overtime against everybody.
Right. We had one last year, actually, in the 3A ranks, Ryan, in District 6. Sugar Salem and South Fremont and Teton all beat each other, and that's only a 3-team league, so they all had to meet up on a Monday and duke it out. That was kind of fun to watch. So, and we had that broadcast on IdahoSports.com last year as well. So it's
45 minutes of madness. That's exactly what it is. I mean, you show up for 45 minutes, and it's like, all right, let's it's like having the old school smokers that they talked about back in the 70s, where you'd go to somebody's garage and try to settle things.
Yeah, no doubt. Okay, so that's kind of the 3A, 2A, 1A look in terms of what's going on football wise. We'll take a break, and we'll come back and tell you what's going on in the Inland Empire League, those 5A, 4A schools, because this week, Ryan. We're finally diving into conference play there, and we'll finally know once and for all, where teams stand. So you are tuning, watching, and or listening to the North Idaho Prepcast on IdahoSports.com, brought to you by the Idaho Division of Public Health. We'll be back right after this.
It's time to start planning for back to school. That's why I got my kids vaccinated for COVID-19. Kids 12 and older can get vaccinated. The vaccines have been researched and tested. They're safe and they work. And I hope everyone will choose to get vaccinated too.
Back on the North Idaho Prepcast, IdahoSports.com. Brandon Bain with Ryan Scaggs. All right, let's dive into Inland Empire League action, 4A, 5As. Let's start with let's start with Sandpoint, because they're the team now that they're ranked third in the media poll, in this week's media poll. I've had Sandpoint in my top 5 pretty consistently all season. They're 3-2 with a 28-13 win over Lake City. Sandpoint, Ryan, went 3-1 against the 5A Inland Empire.
They would be the second place team in 5A.
Yeah, their only loss was to Coeur d'Alene on that last minute field goal by Braden Bankston.
Yeah, so you look at the 4A picture as it looks right now. I mean, it looks muddy. It looks just like the IML. Obviously, nobody's played each other yet, so you don't really know. I mean, Lakeland's 4-3, Sandpoint's 3-2, Moscow's at 3-3. Sandpoint, I think we have a more clear picture on who they are versus the other two teams. Offensively, I mean, it all goes through Garrett Cox, and he had a monster game last week against a much improved Lake City team. I'll give Lake City credit; they're playing better football. And then you get 5A numbers just kind of work their way through, and I think there's a few injuries here and there. I noticed a couple names that were left off the stat sheet this last week for Sandpoint, so I know that there was a couple new kids that were out there, but they do have some depth which helps them at certain positions, especially up front on the offensive line. But like I said, I mean, it all goes through Garrett Cox. And we know Parker Pettit can take over a game too, but we really haven't seen it this year. I think we see flashes of it, but who can stop Garrett Cox? And if Lakeland's defense is stout enough, I think they can slow him down a little bit. And then if their offense shows up, like we've seen a couple of times this year, they've been able to blow up the scoreboard a little bit. And we saw it last week with Timberlake, but Timberlake and Sandpoint are two totally different ball clubs. Sandpoint I still think is the favorite, obviously, to win the conference. I look at things and they got to have a playmaker show up besides Garrett Cox. I think that's going to be the limiting factor in state playoffs, is who else is going to show up and start taking the reins and take a little bit of the pressure off. Because you get some of those other teams, especially down in District 3 or even 5 and 6, if they meet one of those teams in the playoffs. They're going to be able to have a couple athletes. They're going to be able to run with Garrett. Homedale certainly kept him under wraps, and we saw what happened there. So, and Homedale's a great team too. I mean, for a 3A team, good grief, they're good. But I mean, they just play sound football. I mean, the one thing that Sandpoint, in their losses, I mean, they turned the ball over a couple times, and that was the limiting factor. When you're so run heavy, you can't turn the ball over, and if you do, you're kind of setting yourself back because you start playing defense with your offense against your own team.
Yep, absolutely. So, let's talk about Sandpoint just for a second when it comes to the playoffs, because, the big picture Sandpoint, they've got the team that they think can go on a deep run. If you look at the Max Preps ratings right now, Ryan, because that's how they'll seed this out, right? Each district gets its representation, but then all 6 and there's 4 at-large bids. But once all 16 teams have been selected, they're then seeded 1 through 16. Now, the 5 conference champs automatically get the top 5 seeds, which means Sandpoint, if they win the IEL, they're going to be at home at least for a little while. But here's where it gets interesting. When you look at the Max Preps ratings right now, Sandpoint is ranked 3rd in the entire state for 4A. They're only behind Skyline and Pocatello. Now, Skyline may not win their conference. They lost to Blackfoot earlier this year. Blackfoot, though, is stuck at number 9 right now because they're 3-3. They keep losing out of conference. So you take away Skyline, and you're talking about Sandpoint potentially as a 1 or 2 seed because of that strength of schedule, which means they may not have to leave home until we get to a championship.
And to Sandpoint's credit, they scheduled really smart. I mean, they scheduled all the 5A teams, obviously. And the Homedale game, even if they lost, still wasn't going to hurt them because they knew what Homedale was. I I mean, we know that they're the state title contender in 3A. It's not going to hurt the rating playing that game. It's a good test. So I think Sandpoint, if they get the 1 or 2 seed, good grief. Then you're looking at a potential state championship or a semifinal game being played in the Kiwi Dome. They don't have to travel much. I like any team's chance that doesn't have to go on the road and go 450, 500 miles to play a first or second round game. I'm going to give them the edge, especially if they get a host in North Idaho, get a host a playoff game. But we don't know what the meat grinder down in the SIC is going to look like. I mean, 4A there is good grief in District 3. Any team's going to beat the snot out of one of the other ones any night. You never know. But Emmett's a solid team. Emmett could beat, if I don't have they played. I don't know if Emmett's played Bishop Kelly yet. Have they?
So Emmett beat Bishop Kelly.
That's right.
But they still play Middleton. So
Middleton, yeah. So and that game's a toss up too. I mean, if Middleton pulls a surprise and beats Emmett, the picture really down there doesn't get much more clear. It certainly would help Sandpoint for their case if they're able to run the table. If Emmett runs the table, I think Emmett jumps them eventually by the end of the year. But, you never know what happens. But Sandpoint's a great team. If they're going to be a top 2 seed, I love their chances because they're going to host more playoff games and then obviously keep at least a semifinal up north. So, that would be, definitely a key situation for them that looking forward. They can't overlook any week, obviously, with Moscow and Lakeland coming up down the stretch. They've got a bye week, I believe, this week. They're not playing anybody. So they get to sit back and watch Moscow and Lakeland trade blows and see who comes out of that one Friday night.
Yes. So let's talk about Lakeland, a 50-0 win over Timberlake. They're real Jekyll and Hyde this year, I feel like. Sometimes they'll come out and look really good and really dominant. Other times you're like, man.
Devin Suko had an awesome week. And he was the Coeur Press player of the week, and he had an awesome game. 4 total touchdowns. But on the defensive side of the ball, I think he had like 5 tackles for loss and an interception against Timberlake too. He plays 2 ways. Quarterback and linebacker. But Lakeland, we talked about their O-line earlier, and we are like, hey, Lakeland's going to be – and I think I said it, Lakeland will be okay. They just have to figure things out up front. Their defense is actually pretty darn stout. We saw them they pitch a shutout against a Timberlake team. Excuse me, they can score, but the question mark was on offense early in the year. I think they're figuring some things out. I think Post Falls has probably made the most jump of any team I've seen as far as from what they were at the beginning to what they are right now. I think Blaine's got his team figured. So I don't really look at that Post Falls game as an indicator of what Lakeland is. I think it was more like, just the numbers game. I think that they were competitive at half, and then they just got out-gassed in the second half. If Lakeland can beat Moscow, I think they got a good shot at making maybe an at-large bid for the playoffs if they can get the win on Friday night. If they lose, I think they're certainly out. But, I like their chances against Moscow just because of the balance they possess. Their running game is solid, but now they're able to get the passing game going a little bit too with Waddington and Calder is getting involved on offense in the receiving game, not just rushing. And they're getting a lot of good work out of Cornish as well, running the ball. So if they can protect, I see them beating Moscow by a couple touchdowns on Friday.
Yeah, Moscow, I think, is just not quite there yet. Lakeland, so there's 4 at-large teams that get bid this year. There's also an automatic bid that goes to either the second-place team from Districts 1 and 2 or the second-place team from District 5. Now, right now, Lakeland trails in that category to Preston, a team that beat them head-to-head in that season opener, that 7-6 game. That could come back to haunt Lakeland, as Preston is 4-2, very strong, and could get that quote-unquote automatic bid. But Lakeland, as you mentioned, a great chance for an at-large as long as they continue to win. So
I think they obviously have to win Friday, and then they've got to be competitive against Sandpoint. Otherwise, they're not getting in.
Yep. So let's talk about the 5A. Coeur d'Alene, very quietly, just finally got back into the media poll and the coaches poll this week. They hadn't been in the coaches poll or media poll since
they've been
week
sitting
1.
there like Rodney Dangerfield. They just can't get any respect.
Seriously, they have played such a difficult schedule. They welcomed in the Ferris Saxons from Spokane this past Friday and won 48-0. Nothing new for Coeur d'Alene.
Yeah, and Coach Amos is doing such a great job with that team. I think early on, I mean, we obviously saw what happened down in southern Idaho when they played Lehigh. And then the next week they had Sandpoint and struggled a little bit on offense. They're finding their identity. Braden Bankston's really settled down, and he's been able to really take command of the offense. And they're getting their playmakers. You know, I think they wanted to rely heavily on the rushing game with Gunner, Julio, but they've kind of figured out, like, no, let's get him in the passing game, get him out in the slot, and find, get those mismatches against linebackers that just can't cover him. And I mean, he went off this last week against Ferris. I mean, good grief. He had 163 total yards, 114 receiving with 3 TDs. I mean, that was a hell of a ball game for him. And then Bankston, the master of efficiency, he was 12 of 18 for 221 and 4 TDs. So with no interceptions, I mean, that was a great game and a masterpiece by him. So, Coeur d'Alene, I think, has figured it out, and they've beat those tough teams like, going over to Seattle and taking care of business over there, and then coming back home and playing a tougher schedule. I mean, gosh, I wish that they would have played Mount Spokane to really see that game, because I think that would have been an ultimate test. Mount Spokane is very comparable to a lot of those SIC teams, the 5As. They play very similar ball to like a Rocky Mountain or a Mountain View, where they can run the ball really well, but they can also hurt you with the passing game. And in that 5A picture, I think I mentioned it to you. I said, keep an eye on Lewiston this year. And, look at them. They're sitting there 5-1 and knocking on the door. I think that late this year, I think that, we'll see. This is the real test there. Lewiston obviously has 1 losses to Sandpoint. So, and that was, a late in the fourth quarter situation. But going back to Coeur d'Alene, the one thing that I've noticed that's like gaudy is their defense is absolutely dominant right now. And, we talked about it a little bit, I think, in our season preview, that they could be pretty good. That secondary they're shut down. They are locked in, and they're limiting teams. I believe they held Ferris to -4 yards passing. So, I don't know of a team that you can hold a team into a negative passing other than, they throw like 3 screens and, one of them gets tackled behind the line of scrimmage for a loss. So, and Ferris, obviously, I think was without, one of their better players, but, still beating a team like that, caliber from the GSL in Spokane. Coeur d'Alene's going to make some noise. I don't know what else they have to do for people to notice what they're doing now, but I think Amos kind of likes it that way, is that they're just going to kind of quietly ease into the picture, and then they could go down and if they get, they'll host a playoff game, obviously, in the first round. If they have to travel because of the ratings, I don't know what it's going to shake up like on the max prep side of things. You may have that number in front of you. I don't know. But
so 5A is kind of like the 1A D2, where it's all kind of predetermined. So on the bracket. So it's not like you're getting seeded 1 through 12. It's just wherever you're at. So I will say, if Coeur d'Alene does win the league, they get a home game in the quarterfinals and also a home game in the semifinals, which would be huge.
That would be massive. Yeah, yep. Absolutely massive. So I don't want to say like Lewiston doesn't pose I don't want to write it off saying Coeur d'Alene's the lock. Go ahead and put them in at the 1 seed. I just don't think Lewiston's got the firepower to keep up with them. And, but stranger things happen. Obviously, they still have to play Post Falls and Lake City too, but which that game will be Friday night, the Lake City Coeur d'Alene game. But yeah, you get to host a quarter in a semi game in the playoffs. I like their chances. They get a puncher's chance at any week. And that the 5A teams in District 3 and 5 and 6 are just going to slobber knock each other every week. So you may get some weird finishes, especially later in the year, that surprise a lot of people. You may get like a Centennial that pulls a shocker over somebody. You never know down there. So it just kind of ends up how the week looks and injury pictures and stuff like that. But right now, I do like their chances. I think that they're one of the Final Four teams in the playoffs. I think that they get to the semis. We saw them last year lose in the semis to the eventual champ, but it's going to be an interesting picture. I think the next few weeks are going to say a lot about Coeur d'Alene, especially if they can beat Lewiston pretty handily.
Yeah, and I think in the 5A bracket, 12 teams get in. 11 of the 12 are already predetermined. There's one at large bid. So the North gets 2 teams in automatically. So it's going to be Coeur d'Alene and either probably whoever wins this game
Lewiston
Friday
Post
night.
Falls.
If I'm being honest. Yeah,
Yeah.
Post Falls at Lewiston. Now, I think whoever loses that game, whoever finishes third in the IEL still has a great chance at that at-large bid, because at that point, you're basically competing with the 7th best team from Boise. That's what it's going to come down to. Third
And if
place.
I'm playing Bennett, I'm playing with house money, man. I'm going out every week and just throwing it on the table because they got nothing to lose. Lewiston, I think, at 5-1, they've done what they can. I mean, that Sandpoint game was a tough loss, but in a great game. But Post Falls is sitting there on the outside looking in with not a lot to lose. I mean, they weren't expected, I think, to finish, like kind of where they're at right now is where I think people looked at them. It was like kind of them and Lewiston. They could have been number 2, but if they get in the playoffs, I think that they could get a win. The way they're playing right now, I don't know if I'd want to play them. I honestly don't. That offense is rolling right now.
Yep. And so that'll be a big game Friday night, Post Falls at Lewiston. And again, we'll do this each week, Ryan. We'll kind of continue to assess the playoff picture and how teams are looking and where they're standing. But I liked this. We're into October now, so I think it's okay to start looking at the brackets and kind of trying to figure out where teams are going to slot in and things like that. So before we wrap it up, I know you've also been paying attention to what's going on soccer wise and volleyball wise up north. What do you got to report on there? We're getting into soccer districts.
Yeah, soccer, Lake City boys. They won their first outright league title since 2018. They won 3-2 over Coeur d'Alene. They won yesterday over St. George's. They shut them out as a Spokane team. It was a game that was moved from the front of the season. I think they moved it to this week. But they're 15-0-1. So the T-Wolves are rolling. Coeur d'Alene's 11-2. I mean, the playoffs, I don't know in soccer what you're looking at, but the North is looking pretty good on the 5A side of things to make some noise. Lake City being undefeated with the one tie. I like their chances. Obviously, Post Falls boys defeated Coeur d'Alene Charter, but they're definitely not in the playoff picture. On girls soccer, Lake City defeated Coeur d'Alene 3-1. And then Post Falls girls volleyball. They're the IEL champs. They defeated Moscow the other day. But they kind of sealed the deal between Lake City and Coeur d'Alene and how that one rolled out. So Post Falls is 22-6, obviously unranked, but volleyball in the state of Idaho, you never know. You can be unranked and come back and win the state championship. The playoffs and the state tournament for volleyball, weird things happen. Lakeland beat Coeur d'Alene on the 4A side of things. They're 3-1, and they're 16-13, defending state champs. 13 losses. I'm not holding a huge grudge against them because they scheduled really heavy in the 5A. So, the Lakeland girls could go to state and definitely trophy. I don't know if they're a state championship quality team, but also shout out to Katie Ryan, who was on that Lakeland team last year. She started against UCLA on Saturday for the Cougs for Washington State, and they had an awesome game. So shout out to her just on the college side of things. But and then, North Idaho Sports, the picture kind of shaking out that it's a dogfight every week. I mean, Mullen beat Kootenai in a tiebreak 3-2. So Mullen's 11-2 overall, I think, I was looking at the wrong record, but Mullen's leading in that conference. So it'll be interesting how things shake out in some of the other sports. I know we talk a ton about football, but I'm big on wanting to give some of the props to the other sports because, the kids up here work really hard, and we at least want to recognize them.
Yeah, and boys and girls soccer, of course, Coeur d'Alene Charter at the 3A level just continue to impress and dominate each week. And Bonners Ferry, I think, is kind of sneaky in boys and girls soccer this year too.
Yeah, especially on the boys' side. Yeah. Coeur d'Alene Charter on the girls' side, we know what they are. They're really stinking good. But Bonners on the boys' side in soccer can make some noise. I mean, Coeur d'Alene Charter, I think, is down a little bit. I don't know if they're going to win conference, to be honest with you. I don't know if that's been settled yet. I think they still have to play one more time. So we'll see how that one shakes up. But we're getting pictures, I think, in all sports right now of kind of like going towards playoffs and what things are going to look like. So as we get closer to state tournament time, it's going to be an exciting next 3 weeks of athletics for sure.
Yeah, and while you were talking about the 5A soccer, I took a quick look at the 5A state brackets. District champs get to go, and then the second place team from the 5A boys and girls will have to win a play-in game to get the state. So Could
Yeah,
be
so you got an
interesting.
11-2 Coeur d'Alene team playing a play-in game. So that tells you how things are going up here.
As usual, like you said, can't get no respect, right?
Yeah, right. We're all Rodney Dangerfield up here. Can't get no respect.
For sure. Well, Ryan, it's been an absolute blast to have you back on. We made it through a show. We did it.
I think I coughed twice, so we're good.
All right. Well, we hope you continue to get better. And
that.
we'll be back next week to talk about everything that happened as we're finally into conference playing football. We'll start to talk about postseason soccer, volleyball wrapping up as well. So it's a busy time. Ryan, thanks for coming on. We appreciate it.
Yeah, no, great to be back. Absolutely. So thanks for having me.
Yeah, of course. All right. Well, thanks for tuning in to the North Idaho Prepcast on IdahoSports.com, brought to you by the Idaho Division of Public Health. For Ryan Scaggs, I'm Brandon Maney. We'll see you next time on IdahoSports.com.